There's a Victorian-era social technique so powerful that when you use it once, people who constantly push your boundaries will either respect you immediately or remove themselves from your life entirely. And here's what makes this fascinating. Modern psychology has proven why it works better than any confrontation ever could. Let me show you exactly what this is. Because once you understand it, you'll never be treated as a doormat again. Picture London, 1875. High society functions where reputation meant everything, and direct confrontation could destroy your social standing overnight. Yet some individuals, particularly women who had virtually no legal power, managed to command absolute respect without ever raising their voices or engaging in conflict. They used something called the cut direct. But this wasn't just ignoring someone. This was a calculated, deliberate psychological boundary that restructured entire social dynamics. And the principles behind it are more relevant today than ever before. Here's what happened when someone crossed a line with a Victorian lady or gentleman who understood this technique. The person who violated the boundary would be treated as though they were invisible, not with anger, not with explanation, not with drama, complete neutrality, as if they had ceased to exist in that person's reality. The offender would attempt to greet them at the next social gathering. Nothing. They'd try to make eye contact. The Victorian would look straight through them, as if looking at empty air. They'd send letters, return unopened or simply never acknowledged. They'd approach mutual friends to intervene. The response would be polite but firm. There's nothing to discuss. This wasn't done out of spite or revenge. It was done as a matter of principle, a clear communication that certain boundaries, once crossed, resulted in permanent consequences. And it worked because it triggered something deep in human psychology that we'll explore in detail. But first, understand this. The people in Victorian society who employed this technique weren't weak. They weren't conflict avoidant. They were strategic. They understood that some battles are won not by fighting, but by refusing to enter the arena altogether. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds cold, that sounds harsh, maybe even cruel. And you'd be right if we were talking about using this for petty grievances or minor misunderstandings. But we're not. We're talking about people who repeatedly disrespect your clearly stated boundaries, who manipulate, who gaslight, who take advantage of your kindness over and over again. These are the people who text you at 3 a.m. expecting immediate responses, who borrow money and never pay back, who make plans and cancel last minute repeatedly, who criticize you publicly but demand your support privately, who drain your energy and give nothing in return. You know exactly who I'm talking about. And here's what most people do when dealing with these boundary pushers. They explain, they justify, they set boundaries verbally and then reset them when they're crossed again. They give second chances, third chances, 20th chances. They have conversations that go nowhere. They try to make the other person understand, as if understanding was ever the issue. It wasn't, and it isn't, because people who repeatedly test your limits aren't confused about where your boundaries are. They're testing to see if you'll actually enforce them. They're checking whether your words have weight, or whether they're just sounds you make before ultimately accommodating whatever they want. The Victorian cut direct worked because it removed this testing ground entirely. There was no negotiation, no explanation, no emotional reaction to manipulate, just consequence. Clean, clear, irreversible consequence. And this is where modern neuroscience gets interesting. When you engage with someone who's crossed your boundaries, when you explain why you're hurt or angry, when you have that conversation for the 5th time, your brain releases cortisol. You're in stress mode. Your amygdala is activated. You're experiencing the situation as a threat that requires your energy and attention. But here's what happens in their brain. They're often getting a dopamine hit from the engagement itself. Whether the attention is positive or negative doesn't matter as much as the fact that they've succeeded in occupying your mental and emotional space. They've gotten a reaction. And for certain personality types, particularly those with narcissistic or manipulative tendencies, this reaction is the goal. When you employ the cut direct principle, you disrupt this entire neural pathway. There's no reaction to feed on, no emotional response to manipulate, no explanation to argue against or twist. Just absence. This triggers something called extinction in behavioral psychology. when a behavior consistently produces no result, the brain eventually stops initiating that behavior because it's wasting energy with zero return. The person learns, often unconsciously, that crossing your boundaries doesn't just result in conflict. It results in complete disconnection. And disconnection, from a neurological standpoint, is one of the most powerful deterrents humans can experience. We're wired for social connection. Our brains evolved in tribal settings where being cut off from the group could mean death. This isn't conscious fear, it's deep programming. When someone experiences genuine social consequence, their brain interprets it as a significant threat to their survival systems. Now, let's be clear about what this technique is and what it isn't. It isn't ghosting someone after a minor disagreement. It isn't punishing people for making mistakes. It isn't about being cruel or enjoying someone's distress. It isn't a manipulation tactic or a way to control others through withdrawal. It is establishing that certain behaviors have permanent consequences. It is protecting your peace and energy from people who've proven they don't respect either. It is choosing your own well-being over someone else's comfort when they've repeatedly chosen their desires over your clearly stated needs. It is the ultimate form of self-respect. The Victorians understood something we've forgotten in our culture of endless second chances and toxic forgiveness. Some people don't deserve access to you. Not everyone has earned the right to your time, energy, or emotional labor. And removing that access isn't mean, it's necessary. Let me give you a modern example of how this works. Sarah had a friend, let's call her Michelle, who had a pattern. Michelle would make plans, confirm them, and then cancel within an hour of the scheduled time. Not occasionally, consistently. For 2 years, this happened at least twice a month. Sarah would express frustration. Michelle would apologize profusely, promise it wouldn't happen again, and then repeat the exact same behavior the next time. Sarah tried everything. She had calm conversations. She set boundaries verbally. She even stopped initiating plans, thinking Michelle would step up if she really valued the friendship. Nothing changed. Then Sarah learned about the cut direct principle. The next time Michelle canceled last minute with another flimsy excuse, Sarah didn't respond. Not with anger, not with understanding, not at all. When Michelle texted days later acting as if nothing had happened, Sarah didn't engage. When Michelle called, Sarah didn't answer. Michelle eventually sent a long message asking what was wrong. Sarah didn't explain, didn't justify, didn't engage in the conversation Michelle wanted to have. After 2 weeks of complete silence, Michelle sent one final message acknowledging her pattern of behavior and apologizing without excuses. Sarah still didn't respond. Because here's the key. The cut direct isn't about getting an apology or change behavior. It's about permanently removing people who've proven through consistent action that they don't respect you. 6 months later, Sarah reported feeling lighter, having more energy, and having deeper connections with people who actually valued her time. The space Michelle occupied wasn't empty. It was filled with better relationships because Sarah had finally enforced a real consequence. This is what happens when you stop negotiating with people who've shown you exactly who they are. But there's a crucial implementation detail most people miss. And if you get this wrong, the technique backfires completely. The cut direct only works when it's final. Not a punishment phase before you eventually reconnect. Not a strategy to get someone to change. Final. This is the difference between a boundary and a manipulation. A boundary says, if you cross this line, there's a permanent consequence. Manipulation says, I'm going to withdraw until you do what I want. Your nervous system knows the difference, even if you don't consciously acknowledge it. If you're using silence or distance as a tool to control someone's behavior, you're still engaged in the dynamic. You're still allowing them to occupy your emotional real estate. You're still in the game. The true power of this technique comes from genuine detachment. You're not angry anymore. You're not hurt anymore. You're not hoping they'll realize what they've lost. You've simply closed a door that should have been locked a long time ago. This is incredibly difficult for people who are naturally empathetic, who see the good in others, who believe everyone deserves infinite chances. And I'm not saying those are bad qualities, but they become self-destructive when applied to people who exploit them. Think about it this way. Every minute you spend managing someone who disrespects your boundaries is a minute you can't spend on people who don't. Every ounce of emotional energy you expend on explaining yourself to someone who's heard it 10 times before is energy you can't give to relationships that actually nourish you. You have finite resources. Time, attention, emotional bandwidth, mental energy. All finite. And people who consistently push your boundaries are taking those resources from you and giving nothing of value in return. They're not confused. They're not trying their best. They know exactly what they're doing. And they're counting on your kindness, your empathy, your benefit of the doubt to keep doing it. The cut direct says, no more. Not with anger, not with drama. Just no more. Now, here's where this gets really interesting from a practical standpoint. When you implement this technique properly, one of two things happens. Either the person genuinely reforms their behavior because they finally encountered a real consequence and they actually value the relationship enough to change, or they don't. And here's the critical part. You never find out which one because you're not watching. This is the ultimate test of whether you're truly detached or still emotionally invested in their response. If you're checking to see if they've changed, if they're suffering, if they miss you, if they've learned their lesson, you're still connected. You're still feeding the dynamic. True implementation means you've moved on so completely that their evolution or lack thereof is irrelevant to your life. They could become a completely different person, and it wouldn't matter because the door is closed, not locked temporarily, removed from the frame. This is what made the Victorian version so effective. There was no pathway back. The decision was made, the consequence was implemented, and life continued as if that person had never existed in your social sphere. In our modern context, this looks like block numbers that stay blocked, deleted contacts, unfollowed social media with no curiosity about their posts, declined mutual invitations without explanation, redirected conversations when mutual friends bring them up, complete neutral disengagement. And here's what happens in your own psychology when you do this correctly. You get your power back. Not power over them, power over yourself. You stop being reactive. You stop being available for manipulation. You stop being the person who can be convinced to give one more chance despite all evidence that chances are wasted on this individual. Your nervous system regulates. The anxiety you felt every time their name popped up on your phone disappears because they can't contact you anymore. The dread you experience before seeing them at events dissolves because you simply don't attend events where they'll be, or you're so genuinely indifferent to their presence that it doesn't register. This is freedom. This is what boundary enforcement actually looks like, not the pseudo-boundaries most people set where they draw a line and then allow it to be crossed repeatedly while complaining about it. Real boundaries have consequences. The cut direct is the consequence. Let me address the most common objection. What about forgiveness? What about compassion? What about being the bigger person? Forgiveness doesn't require connection. You can forgive someone for your own peace while still maintaining complete distance. Forgiveness is releasing the anger and resentment you hold, not opening yourself back up to repeated harm. Compassion can be extended from a distance. You can hope someone grows and changes while recognizing they need to do that work far away from you. Being the bigger person doesn't mean being the person who tolerates disrespect indefinitely. Sometimes being the bigger person means having enough self-respect to walk away from situations that diminish you. The most compassionate thing you can do for someone who repeatedly violates boundaries is to stop enabling that behavior by continuing to give them access to you. You're not helping them grow by absorbing their dysfunction. You're just teaching them that their behavior works. Here's the implementation framework. If you're ready to use this, first, identify the non-negotiable boundaries, not preferences, not hopes, actual lines that cross indicate a fundamental incompatibility or disrespect. These are things like consistent lying, manipulation, disrespect of clearly stated needs, violation of trust, patterns of behavior that harm you despite repeated conversations. Second, communicate these boundaries clearly once, not multiple times. Once. This is a negotiable. You're simply informing them of the reality. If this happens, I will completely disengage. No anger, no drama, just permanent distance. Third, when the boundary is crossed, implement immediately and completely. No explanations, no final conversations, no closure meetings. The boundary was clear, the consequence was stated, now it's simply executed. Fourth, block every avenue of contact. Phone, email, social media, mutual friends as intermediaries. Complete disconnection. This isn't about being harsh. It's about being serious. Fifth, maintain permanently. This is where most people fail. They implement for a week, a month, maybe 6 months, and then they soften. They respond to one message. They accept one apology. And the entire cycle begins again because the person now knows the consequence isn't actually permanent. The cut direct is permanent or it's nothing. Now, I know some of you are thinking about specific people in your life right now. That friend who always takes but never gives. That family member who uses guilt as a weapon. That ex who keeps trying to maintain just enough connection to keep you uncertain. That colleague who undermines you and then pretends it was a joke. You've tried everything else. You've communicated, you've compromised, you've given chances. And nothing has changed because nothing was going to change. They're getting what they want from the current dynamic. Why would they change it? The only thing that creates real change is real consequence. And for people who've proven they don't respect your verbal boundaries, the only consequence that matters is complete removal of access. This is your permission to protect yourself. This is your reminder that you don't owe anyone infinite chances. This is your wake-up call that staying connected to people who diminish you isn't kindness, it's self-betrayal. The Victorians were onto something profound. They understood that dignity isn't defended through arguments, it's maintained through standards. They knew that some doors, once closed, should remain closed. They recognized that respect isn't negotiated, it's demonstrated through action. You have the power to implement this right now. Today, this moment. That person who immediately came to mind when I started describing boundary violators. You know exactly what needs to happen. You've known for months, maybe years. You've just been waiting for permission or validation or the right moment. This is all three. The right moment is now because nothing about the dynamic will improve with more time. Permission is granted because you're an autonomous adult who gets to decide who has access to your life. Validation comes from understanding that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. So here's what you do after this video ends. You identify the person or people who consistently violated your boundaries despite clear communication. You make the decision that their access to you is permanently revoked. And then you implement completely. Block, delete, disconnect, move forward. No final message, no explanation, no closure conversation. They had multiple chances to respect the boundaries you set. They chose not to. The consequence is disconnection. Clean, clear, final. Your life will improve immediately. The mental space they occupied will clear. The anxiety will diminish. The energy you were spending managing their dysfunction will become available for relationships that actually feed your soul. This is a Victorian lesson. Some people don't deserve your attention, and removing that attention isn't cruel. It's self-respect. Master this principle and watch how quickly people either rise to meet your standards or remove themselves from your life. Either way, you win. The question is, are you ready to actually enforce your boundaries? Or are you going to keep having the same conversations with the same people expecting different results? Because that's the definition of insanity, and you're better than that. Choose yourself. Close the door. Move forward. Your future self will thank you.